Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on alternative uses for pulse starch. So I'm Janelle Carlin. I'm the Director of Quality and Processing with Pulse Canada. I'm just going to take some time here today to set the stage for today's webinar, but we are going to be joined by two different teams that were involved in the creation of reports that will be available for download following the webinar. So just as a reminder for some housekeeping items, we will be holding a question and answer period at the end of the webinar, and you can find the chat box where you can input your questions on the right-hand side of the screen. The reports that we will be discussing today are available for download on the event platform, but we also will be circulating those following the webinar alongside the recording of today's session, so that will also be available following. So getting started here, Pulse Canada, we are the national association that represents growers, traders, and processors of Canadian pulses. And here on this slide, I just wanted to highlight that Canada in particular has a really long history of processing pulses into ingredients. So one of the first ever pea protein fractionators actually was established here in Canada in 1980s. And since then, we've seen significant growth in the capacity to process pulse ingredients. So this would include anything from proteins, flours, fibers, starches, and other fractions. So one thing as a result of this increase in capacity to note is that when we're talking about pulse composition, starch represents the majority component of this seed. And when we're talking about fractionation into protein ingredients, that's mainly yellow pea and faba bean ingredients are the most common commercially fractionated pulses. So here you can see just roughly the average distribution of components within the seed, where starch is representing 40 to 50% of that total seed. So as we do start to see increases in the capacity then to fractionate pulses into ingredients, we are seeing significant growth in terms of the volume of the starch ingredients that are available in the marketplace. So finding uses for these starch ingredients is becoming something that's increasingly important to help to improve the profitability of the sector here in Canada. So when we're talking about the types of starch ingredients that are available from pulse processing, there's two major forms of fractionation that are employed. One would be wet fractionation, which leverages alkaline extraction and isoelectric precipitation, utilizing the solubility of each of the individual seed components to isolate a highly purified form of starch. So typically this can be 85% or higher, depending on the processing conditions that are employed. And then we also can derive another starch-rich component, often called starch-rich pulse flour, which is dry fractionated using air classification technology, and that separates particles within the seed based on their size and density to produce a very coarse fraction, where starch represents less than 85%, but still over 55% roughly of that final product. So one thing to note is that when we're talking about these ingredients that are derived from pulse starches is that they do tend to display different characteristics compared to common commercial starches. So when we're looking for alternative uses, it's difficult to use these as a direct substitution when you think about conventional starch ingredients because of these distinct characteristics and because the purity levels do differ from supplier to supplier. But typically what we do see is one of the unique attributes of pulses is their high amylose content, ranging anywhere from 30 to 50%. And that confers a number of very unique properties. So we do tend to see lower gelatinization temperatures, higher retrogradation rates. If you're looking at pasting properties compared to common starches like corn and tapioca, they might have a lower peak and a higher final pasting viscosity. And because of this amylose content in their native state, they're a little bit more resistant to enzymatic attack, as well as high temperature processing conditions. And then we do see that they have a unique and strong gelling ability, which allows them to form films. And that's something that proves to be quite useful in certain applications. So if we take a look at currently where these starches are being employed, the majority in Canada and North America is in that animal feed and ethanol markets. But one thing that we do see moving forward is that there is a lot of growing interest to diversify away from these markets, simply because that's the lowest value that suppliers can get when they're selling starch into that animal feed and ethanol industry. So if you take a look across end-use applications for pulse starches, again, here I'll mention animal feed and ethanol is really the lowest value that suppliers can get for those pulse starches. So what we're doing here at Pulse Canada is exploring a lot of different opportunities to try to diversify away from these uses into other industries where producers might be able to get a higher value for their pulse starch or higher volumes. So there's a couple of different end-use applications that have been explored in a couple of previous projects and reports that we've commissioned here. Again, the one other thing outside of price to consider is as we do start to see volumes of these products grow, not only would we want to see higher value, we need to accommodate larger volumes into these areas. So not all the starch is going to be eligible to go into some of those higher volume categories. Pharmaceutical industries is an example where it's extremely high value, but there's a very, very minor volumes. So we need to learn to balance the two when we're exploring market development opportunities for pulse starches. So that's something here. Just wanted to highlight that is as we're looking to explore, it's all about optimizing that value and volume opportunities for pulse starch. So I just wanted to highlight here, we've previously highlighted a number of different projects that we've commissioned with various partners at Pulse Canada, but I wanted to make mention to them here today before we dive into two new reports. So these are all available on the Pulse Canada website, where we have a white paper which provides a technical overview of structure and functional properties of pulse starches, specifically looking at how they might compare to common commercial starches like corn and tapioca. We've also commissioned a report to evaluate modification of starches in general and how existing modification technologies can be leveraged to really maximize the value for pulse-based starches, as well as a feasibility assessment looking at P-starch applications in paper and packaging industries. So today here, we're going to be talking about two new resources that are available on Pulse Starch. The first is going to be diving into insights that were derived from IP and patent application claims that are leveraging the unique attributes of pulse starches. And then the second is going to be a feasibility assessment looking at the application of P-starch into bioplastics. So today I'm going to be joined by a number of speakers here. The first off is going to be a group of experts from RTI Innovation Advisors. So we have Dr. Jacob Smith, Dr. Michaela Hayes, and Zara Gemelaiden joining us here today. So I'm going to be passing the stage over to them. And thank you, everyone, and hope you enjoy.
Thanks, Janelle, for that kind introduction, and thanks everyone who is in attendance today. It's a pleasure to be here and spend some time talking about the work that we worked on with Janelle and her team earlier this year, diving deep into pulse starch intellectual property to uncover some insights and highlight some opportunities for pulse starches and innovation in that space in particular. So we'll kind of speed through a couple of these sections today, the who we are and the approach, and we'll spend the majority of time on the research summary where we'll be sharing some of the unique attributes of pulse starches and some example applications within given fields. And then we'll finish off with some conclusions at the end of the presentation. And at the end of the webinar today, we've got some time held for any questions that you all would like to ask. So starting off with the who we are a business unit of RTI International, one of the largest independent research institutes in the United States. The RTI Innovation Advisors help amplify the innovation impact of our clients as it aligns with our broader institutional mission of improving the human condition. And just to give a little bit of an overview of the scale of our institute, you can see we have nearly 6,000 staff spread across the world doing research in over 250 different disciplines where we're working with a wide range of clients and producing a range of different outputs that range from simple PowerPoint presentations to journal articles to book chapters, to even patents on some of the things that we're working on internally in terms of innovation and projects. And our team specifically, the innovation advisors, we amplify the innovation impact of our clients across 3 main service areas. So you'll see those here: innovation strategy, insights, and commercialization. The project that we're going to be discussing today is really aligned with our insights service offering, where within these projects, we can dive deep into market or user research to bring technical data-backed insights and actionable strategies associated with those insights to help clients solve those tough challenges that they're facing as it relates to innovation. So within the insights service offering, we often are looking at a wide array of different resources to bring the actionable recommendations from the projects that we're working on to the clients we're working with. Those could be everything from journal articles, scientific literature, book chapters, news stories, proprietary information from databases, SEC filings, so on and so forth. For this particular project, we actually focused very specifically on intellectual property. And we worked closely with Janelle and Pulse Canada to develop a collaborative approach to make sure that we had the right breadth and depth as we dove into intellectual property associated with Pulse Starches. So you'll see the 3-step strategy here on the slide. We started with first doing a broad patent search where we went out and gathered nearly 11,000 patents and patent applications filed since 1980. We worked closely with the Pulse Canada team to do some strategic filtering on that data set, and ultimately wound up coming up with a subset of those 11,000 patents that were extremely relevant to this particular work and to innovation in the field of pulse starches today. And the team that's presenting today dove deep into that refined set of patents to pull out some key data, insights, and trends. We'll touch on those at a high level within the report today, but just know that within the paper that Janelle mentioned that will be available after the talk, there's a lot of additional information and kind of more detailed insights that came out of this research. So I'll start by giving kind of a broad overview on the next 2 slides of the data set as a whole, looking at that full 11,000 patents before we dive into some specifics associated with that minority set that we focused on of about 200 or so patents. So when you look across the space from about 1980 through to 2022, in this case, you'll see that the vast majority of patents and applications filed began picking up in the kind of early 2000s time period and really accelerated and took off exponentially as you got into the 2014 timeframe. So this data was collected at the beginning of this year, and likely some of those 2016 and on times have further grown as more applications and patents have been filed or granted or published. But this gives you a general overview of how innovation has been occurring in this space over time. And when you look at the geographical landscape of where this innovation is happening or where these patents are being filed, you'll see that the United States and China by far are going to leading the push on this front. So China with over half the total patents in the data set, and the United States with about a little less than 10% of those total patents. So when you dive a little bit deeper into the subset of those most relevant patents, what you'll see, and maybe is not surprising based on what Janelle presented earlier, is that pea starch was mentioned most often in the claims of these patents. Over 50% of the refined data set that we looked at mentioned pea. You have minor mentions for other different types of pulses like mung bean, fava bean, lentil, and chickpea, with a few others sprinkled in there. But pea has kind of been the main driver of these patents and applications that have been filed. And as Janelle noted, um, native pulse starches have some great benefits and also some challenges or things that maybe make them less well suited for particular applications. One way that folks have begun to get around some of those limitations or some of the challenges of working with these particular types of starches is through modification methods. And when we analyze this refined patent set for those application methods, what you'll notice, maybe not surprisingly, is that grinding and milling combined came up with kind of the highest overall mentions within the claims of these patents and applications. And then modification methods were actually mentioned quite often, up to over 30 times for oxidation and hydroxypropylation within this data set. So diving a bit deeper into what this means in terms of how these starches can be used across different industries and applications, put together a couple of truncated tables here. On the left side of these tables, you'll see that we've got select properties and benefits that were called out or mentioned within the claims or within the patents and applications themselves. And along the top of these charts, we have select applications. So this is just a snapshot of the full set of data that you'll get by looking at that full written report for the unabbreviated version. But what you'll see within food and beverage, specifically on this slide, is that the texture enhancing, thickening, gelling, and water binding are some of the top mentioned qualities that make pulse starches a great fit for these applications. When you look a little bit further down the list, you'll start to see some interesting things and benefits that emerge. Things like gluten-free, things like resistant starch, low glycemic index, or being used in sugar or fat reduction strategies for products, and some mentions of solubility as well. So in this data set, there's a wide range of different properties that these pulse starches or modified pulse starches have that contribute to them being a great match for a wide array of applications, or at least that companies are starting to learn how to work with these to make them a great fit for these types of applications. Similarly, when you look at industrial applications or non-food applications in general, this is another truncated chart organized in the same manner. We don't see the same things pop up as mentioned most often for these applications. At the top of this list, you'll see properties and benefits like biodegradable, water soluble, film forming, gelling, a lot of the things that were mentioned by Janelle as helping enhance the value of pulse starch for applications outside of just your typical food or animal feed applications. So the last slide that I'll be presenting today before I hand it off to Sarah and Michaela to walk through some of the more specifics associated with this is this overview that highlights there are a wide range of applications and sub-applications that are covered within that written report. We've grouped these into 4 different categories that we'll walk through as part of this presentation today. And we've tailored this mainly towards food and beverage applications and sub-applications, and we'll briefly touch on the cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, the industrial and the pet food and feed, just to note that these are important in areas where there are potentially high volume opportunities for pulse starch moving forward. And the second speaker today will dive a little bit deeper into one of the industrial applications that we mentioned in terms of bioplastics and films. So with that, I'll hand it off to Sarah, who will take over on the food side.
Great. Thanks, Jacob. So within the food side, this is a general overview slide of what we've seen in terms of functionality, application, pulse type, and modification. Just to give a quick overview, some of the desired functionalities included texture modifying, amylase resistance, gelling, granule size, viscosity, but as Jacob mentioned earlier, there was really a wide variety of functionality that I'll touch on in more detail later. In terms of application, again, very wide. I want to highlight noodles and pasta as well as baked goods because within the patent set that we looked at, those were two of the most common applications that we've seen. Pulse types, we have chickpea, lentil pea, and a few others, but really the main one was pea starch. And then in terms of modification, there was also quite a few of them. So going into more detail, I will be going through different food applications. I do want to note that the order we have them in depends on the number of patents that we've seen. So we're going from the most to least. The first one that we've seen is noodles and pasta. Native and modified pulse starches are usually employed as in noodles, pasta, and bean jelly sheet formulations because of their strong gel forming properties. And in terms of modification, we've seen that acylated pea starch has been cited to reduce issues with stickiness while also providing the desired texture in noodles. So an example patent that we have are noodles made of pea starch because they maintain the firm and non-sticky texture. This can also be done with mung bean starch, but pea starch is a cheaper alternative to achieve the same result. Next, we have baked goods. So native pulse starches usually have a high amylose content, which gives them a makes them relatively slowly digestible because of their lower glycemic index. Additionally, pre-gelatinized starches enhance the quality of gluten-free products. So an example patent that we've seen is gluten-free bread. Usually the main struggle is to get the right texture and the proper honeycomb structure that you would see in traditional bread. So combining pre-gelatinized or pre-cooked native pulse starches with plant-derived fibers has been a way of achieving the desired structural as well as organoleptic characteristics that would be similar to traditional bread. Sauces, soups, salads, and spreads have been another major application that we've seen. The high amylose content of pulse starches gives those products a pulpy texture that is desirable in dressings and spreads. And then it's also stable under shear, which provides advantages in terms of the production of the products. And then finally, it also has advantages for nutritional value because pulse starches can be used to enable fat reduction while still maintaining the same mouthfeel. An example patent that we've seen is used for maintaining pulpy texture for reconstituted products. Some of those products include dried applesauce or tomato sauce. Sometimes rehydrating those products, you don't have the same pulpy texture as the initial product. So using a pre-gelatinized legume starch with up to 50% amylose content has been found to give those desired characteristics. Native and modified pulse starches can also be used in a wide variety of food pigments as well as for organic compound preservation because they're able to stabilize them or mask associated off flavors. And pulse starches can also have film forming properties, which has been leveraged to create encapsulation agents, which further helps with stability. A major example that has been is a very pertinent challenge in the food industry right now is stabilizing natural food dyes. So we saw a patent for hydroxypropylated starch that's derived from pea or corn, but ideally from pea starch with 35% to 38% amylose content, and it's been seen to easily stabilize dyes. Hydrothermally treated starch and lipid mixtures form complexes that have been shown to act as functional ingredients with strong emulsifying properties. Similarly, mixtures of pulse starch and albumin protein have been shown to stabilize oil and water emulsions and create stable foams. And then additionally, cross-linking or pre-gelatinizing pulse starches can significantly enhance their thickening and gelling functional properties. An example that we've seen was increasing oil and water emulsion stability, which has been done using pulse starch combined with albumin. Another application we've seen is analog products. So pea starch specifically, both in its native and modified forms, is increasingly being used as a substitute for animal-derived ingredients in food. That's because of its gelling, viscosity development, and water retention properties that enable it to be successful in that sector. An example is vegan eggs. So there has been challenges to create vegan eggs that properly mimic the texture of real eggs. So using pea starch as well as proteins, as opposed to potato or tapioca starch in baked product formulation, makes recipes less elastic and lighter and allows for greater dough expansion and creating more egg-like products. Pulse starches can also be used in batters, breading, and coating system. That's because of their high amylose contents, which aids in gelation and film formation, which facilitates coating and boosts crispiness in the final product. An example that we've seen was a mixture of pulse starches that can be used to create batters with crispy texture and eliminate the need for traditional hydrocolloids, which is an added advantage as well. Pulse starches can also be used in beverage application. The high amylose content of native pulse starches makes them slowly digestible, which contributes to low glycemic index profiles. So this is really the nutritional benefit. And an example is a legume starch beverage that is used in infant nutrition. So really ensuring the decrease of carbohydrate absorption and an increase in healthier beverages. Next, we have meat products. Within meat products, pulse starches have mostly been used as binders or thickeners that improve the overall texture and consistency. An example patent that we've seen is a sausage recipe where pulse starch has been used to improve the thickening of the mixture as well as binding. Next, we have snacks. Pulse starches can be used as a key component in extruded snacks because of their expansive properties. They've also been seen to provide crisp product texture and low adhesion in the mouth upon chewing, so just better mouthfeel and texture overall. An example patent that we've seen is an extruded starch product that maintains shape, has the desired texture, and an attractive appearance during extrusion and heat conditioning. And incorporating pulse starch into that formula has been found to produce successful extrudates. Next, within confectionery and desserts, we've seen that pulse starches have strong gelation properties, which have been demonstrated to provide desirable mouthfeel in products like gels and puddings. They can also be combined when pulse starches are combined with other starches like cornstarch, because one main issue that we've seen with pulse starches is syneresis. So that's why combining other starches mitigates that problem. And this is kind of what's being described in this patent that combines pea and cornstarch to resolve that issue. Next, in dairy products, specifically yogurt and cheese products, pulse starches as well as pulse starch lipid complexes have served as nutritious and potentially cleaner label alternatives to traditional texturizing agents. An example patent is within cheese-based foods. So they usually don't always guarantee a balanced nutritional supply. So using pea starch as well as vegetable fibers can be a viable alternative to undesirable ingredients while also providing the functional properties, including texture. Finally, we have ready-to-eat meals. So this is one of those examples where we want to highlight some of the pitfalls of pulse starches, and one of them is retrogradation. So within this example, we have an instant porridge that the patent utilizes sugar as well as low temperatures by freezing the product at -80 degrees Celsius to lower the chances of retrogradation within this product. I will now pass it on to Michaela.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. As Jacob noted, we specifically wanted to focus a lot of our time on highlighting the food applications relevant for pulse starch. But we also, as part of our patent analysis, dove into applications that extend well beyond just the food industry and highlight its utility among cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, various industrial applications, as well as pet food and feed applications. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes giving kind of a high-level overview of those industries, the functionality of pulse starch that makes it suitable for end applications within these industries, and highlight just a couple of example patents. So to start, this slide provides a high-level overview of pharmaceutical and cosmetic applications. So specifically, as we look at the utility of pulse starch for these end products, the gelling capacity of pulse starch that makes it advantageous for film forming is highly utilized in the pharmaceutical patents that we came across. In addition to that, the high amylose content and amylase resistance of pulse starches that allow for the controlled release of things such as active pharmaceutical ingredients, again, make pulse starch very advantageous within the pharmaceutical world. So as you look to some of the applications that we came across relevant to pharmaceuticals, you'll see controlled release tablets, solubility enhancing tablets, some more unique applications including nanoparticles and nanosponges, as well as like vaccine deliveries, oral vaccine deliveries specifically. So various end use applications based on these functional benefits and the uniqueness of pulse starch. As you look more towards the cosmetic space, we found that, again, the gelling capabilities and film forming capabilities were highly advantageous, as well as the texture modifying advantages of pulse starch. So within cosmetics, there were applications that spanned foundations, mascaras, hair gel products that enhanced curling and protect against heat damage, as well as like cleansing towels. So again, various different applications based on some of these unique functionalities of pulse starch. Across both of these industries, the most common, again, type of pulse starch was pea, followed by chickpea and lentil. And among the various modifications that were used for these end applications, cross-linked was the one that was most common, particularly in the pharmaceutical space. Cross-linking of pulse starch enhances its amylase resistance and improves its ability to control the release of, say, an active pharmaceutical ingredient. So this slide kind of highlights a little bit more detail relative to both pharmaceuticals and cosmetics. Again, within pharmaceuticals, pulse starch was most often used as a disintegrant. It improved the film capabilities of the end result, so the tablet in most cases, and was used in nanoparticle and nanosponge applications. Notably, there were several patents that highlighted the use of pulse starch as a replacement for gelatin based off of some of these functional attributes. And this was advantageous in cases where companies wanted to find an alternative for an animal-based product using plant-based pulse protein. Seem to fit the bill in that case. So the one example patent that we're highlighting is the most common utilization of pulse starch within the pharmaceutical patents that we analyze, so the controlled release of APIs. So this basically, there's often a challenge associated with improving the cost and purity of traditional excipients. And so the use of a cross-linked high amylose pulse starch was utilized to actually control the release of these pharmaceutical ingredients. Within the cosmetic space, as I've highlighted already, mascara, foundations, hair gels were common end applications among these patents. Specifically, the film forming capabilities of the pulse starch improves the resistance against sweat, thus allowing for the makeup to adhere longer. It's longer lasting, has higher intensity than alternatives. And so the patent we're highlighting here is an improved mascara where the company leveraged a high amylose legume starch, so 30 to 75% amylose, was used in conjunction with a variety of other ingredients that resulted in a mascara that was found to last longer and be resistant to crumbling, which is often an issue among mascara brands. So Next slide, we want to highlight various end applications across industrial materials. So this is kind of summarizing a lot of different patent literature. So there's various applications among adhesives, bioplastics, which we'll hear more about in the second presentation today. There's applications in agriculture, waste treatment, and much more. Because of the various end applications that live within industrial materials, there's a lot of different unique functionalities of pulse starches that are leveraged to meet the needs of these products. So some that we saw in the pharmaceutical and cosmetic space were the film forming, gelling capacities, encapsulation capacity, the ability to control release of certain active ingredients. But some of the additional functional attributes that are a bit more unique to the industrial materials are granule size. So as you look at pulse starch by comparison to other more traditional starches, granule size is often smaller. Pulse starch enables desired transparency of certain end products like bioplastics and films. And higher viscosity, as Janelle mentioned earlier in this presentation. The final viscosity of pulse starch is typically higher than that of traditional starches and found to be advantageous across various end applications. So I won't read the full list of applications that we came across here, but just to highlight a few, there were multiple patents that focused on corrugated board production. Also, many patents that focused on kind of the adhesive space as a whole, several focusing on glue compositions, for instance, biodegradable films, packaging, and containers was another topic of multiple patents. We also saw some more unique end products such as glass fiber production, sludge treatment, and cork production, like a wine cork, part of that production process. So many various utilities within the industrial space. The most common pulse types, again, were pea being the most prominent, followed by chickpea and faba bean. And then the most often, the modifications used most often were grinding, oxidation, esterification, and alkali treatment. So to give a little bit more detail here, relevant to the adhesives industry, several of the functional attributes that were specifically advantageous in adhesive applications were the bimodal starch distribution in terms of its granule size, the high tact and wet bond strength that really enabled utility for adhesive applications. The strong gelling capabilities, as we've mentioned multiple times, made pulse starches suitable for various films and coatings. And then the particle size was particularly found to be advantageous for several coatings in very niche industries of ceramic bodies and exhaust systems, as well as glass fiber production. The thermal and physical properties were also found to be very beneficial for foam installation, which is another quite unique end application. I'll highlight two patent examples here again, but just to note, there's many more that live in this space, and the document that will follow this presentation will provide much more detail with that regard. So the first patent I'll highlight is biodegradable films and foils. So within the paper and cardboard industry, you often have a film or foil that wraps that product, and most often this is not recyclable or biodegradable. And with the increasing desire to improve the sustainability of products that we're creating today, that is obviously an advantage if you can create an alternative that is biodegradable or recyclable. So in this case, a hydroxypropyl high amylose pea starch was used to create this film. And not only was it more environmentally friendly, but it was also able to have a superior tear strength, extensibility, and higher transparency, as I noted on the prior slide. The second patent worth highlighting here is pulse starch's use as a fertilizer additive. So there were several different attributes of pulse starch that were found to be advantageous in this case. The oxidized pea starch was the specific type of starch that was leveraged, and the high viscosity of this starch allowed for its improved adherence or the improved adherence of the silicon powder to the body of the fertilizer. The hydrophilicity of the pea starch enabled its better and more uniform distribution throughout the field. And then its biodegradability enhanced the ability to be decomposed by microbes and contribute to adding carbon to the soil after its use. So highlights very unique properties of pulse starch that were leveraged for an end product. The last area or industry we'll cover is the pet food and feed. So by comparison to the segment we just walked through, there's a much more focused and specific end products here. So really the most desired functional attribute of pulse starches that was leveraged for the production of pet feed and pet food was its texture modifying capabilities. And this was highlighted by Sarah in the food space several times as well. End applications that we came across among the patents that we analyzed included feed for pork, for fish, for goose. Specifically, wet pet food was highlighted in several patents. And then one more unique application was for fish bait, which I'll highlight in the next slide. The only type of pulse starch that was leveraged among these patents was pea starch. And the most common modifications were grinding and enzymatic treatment, specifically polynase treatment was leveraged for these applications. Okay, so most commonly, again, pet food, the use of pulse starch was leveraged for improving texture, but also binding. And in the case of creating a fish bait, it was also found to be advantageous because it's a bit more environmentally friendly than alternatives. So to dive into these two examples, the first one is pulse starch is used as a food texturant. So in this case, the patent was focused on creating a moist meat-based pet food. And creating the desired end texture for this product has found to be historically challenging, but the use of a native and purified pea starch solved this problem in the case of this patent, and effectively served as the texturizing agent to meet the demands of the end texture desired. And then the second example here is hydrogel fish bait. So essentially, this is the use of mug bean starch, in this case, to create a hydrogel that's used in a fish bait composition. Not only did the use of pulse starch enable a more biodegradable and environmentally friendly solution for fish bait production, but it also, like we saw within the pharmaceutical space, helped to control the release rate of that bait, making the fish bait last longer. So a very unique end application, leveraging, again, multiple advantages of pulse starch. So with that, I know we've covered a very wide array of end-use applications for pulse starch. We've highlighted many different abilities to use pulse starch within food, but also the many advantages of using it in products outside of the food industry. So I'll leave you with just a few kind of conclusions, and then, as we noted, we do have time for questions a little bit later. So first kind of conclusion is that as we dove into the vast array of IP literature and sought to delve and generate insights from that literature, it became very apparent that native pulse starch has high utilization across many different applications. However, as you look into the literature more, it becomes very clear that leveraging multiple means of modification, so whether that's physical, chemical, enzymatic, blending with other starches, as Sarah alluded to earlier, or even complexation in some cases, allows you to further customize and tailor that pulse starch to meet the needs of even more end applications than native starch can meet alone. And then the last note I'll leave you with is that it's kind of been mentioned various times throughout this presentation, but there's often additional benefits associated with leveraging pulse starch by comparison to the alternative that it is replacing in many of these patent examples that we highlighted. So in the industries I just noted, biodegradability, being non-toxic or more environmentally friendly, being a plant-based alternative to a traditionally animal-based product, are all additional advantages that pulse starch can offer. As you look into the food space, pulse starch often offers a non-GMO alternative to what's traditionally or many times a GMO starch. It often will provide a gluten-free alternative to different ingredients or applications. And additionally, we've noted in a lot of our work with many food manufacturers that there's a general desire to increase the biodiversity of the supply chain that manufacturers are leveraging for food production. It's been recognized that the vast majority of our food consumption is based on very few commodities today. So in the pursuit to increase the diversity of supply chains, pulses kind of are a great alternative and means to do that. So I'll leave you with those thoughts for now. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to questions later on today.
All right. I just want to say thank you to the team at RTI. That is an abundance of information, so I'm sure that we'll have lots of questions. Our next presentation here is going to be by Dr. Jian-Bo Liu at the BioProcessing Innovation Center in Leduc, Alberta. So we will start off with that presentation now.
Welcome to my presentation, Evaluation of Canadian pea starch for Bioplastic Applications. This presentation is to revisit the report as a result of a project we work with Pulse Canada. It was conducted by a team of engineers, scientists, technologists, business development officer from Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation in the year of 2022 to 23. I will start today's presentation with some background information, who we are, why we did this research, followed by how we did it. At the end, before I give you some takeaway messages, we'll discuss about some findings we have as a result of this project. We are part of the Ministry of Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation Bioindustry Opportunity Section. We have 2 locations, one research lab at South Campus of University of Alberta. We do benchtop development and in-house analytical work there. We also have a pilot scale facility, Bio-Innovation Development Center. It's a 10,000 square feet pilot facility with many pieces of unique unit equipment. We help clients scale up their technology on the development of a product and the process by using our facility, equipment, and expertise. Specifically to my program, Biomaterials and Bioplastic, we can do from benchtop development by using our macro compounder to pellet scale scaling up by using the twin screw extruder. So you can see from the photo, it's our big pellet scale twin screw extruder. Following extrusion, we do have capacity to do injection molding. Right now, we can do basement for property test and also small piece of part. In a few months, we will have bigger injection molder coming into our pellet plant, so we can make big piece of equipment parts for demonstration as a request by a lot of our clients. To help the process and product development, we do have some capacity on characterization side. With that, we can do size profiling, porosity test, chemical composition test, and some thermal and mechanical property test. About this project itself, what we already know and what we were to do. Why starch? So it's obviously that all the manufacturers of the protein, they have a byproduct, mainly starch. We all want to add value to that. That's one main drive for this product. And on the other hand, we can see starch is relatively inexpensive. However, it's renewable. It's from an annual crop. So we see it as a sustainable feedstock. At the end of the life of the plastic or its application, if it's biodegradable, so it will have quite less impact on the environment. So we can use starch as an ingredient of bioplastic in two forms. Granule form, like powder directly blended with polymer. And we also can plasticize starch itself to make thermoplastic bioplastic. A lot of research work have been done, and we found out a lot of factors affect the performance of a product, such as the particle size, if you have a properly modified starch or not, and the amylose and amylopectin ratio. It's obviously plasticizer will play a big role. And the method of processing, like if you use casting method or thermomelting method, they all make difference. Finally, if you put additive or not to reinforce the performance, and if you put something else there, so some cases you need capabilitizer to help coupling different ingredients together. Although we know so many things, there are still some questions to be answered. The first one is, like other biomass as a component of a material, it tends to absorb moisture from the environment during storage or the life of the product. It might compromise the property at a later stage. Secondly, compared to its counterpart, a fossil-based plastic, the strength of bioplastic is relatively lower. And all the information we talk about above mentioned mostly were about the cereal and root or tuber crops, such as cornstarch, potato starch, cassava starch. We have quite limited information on pea starch or pulse starch. So we conclude the objective of this project was to evaluate pea starch as a feedstock to make bioplastic for food packaging applications. So we only do thermoplastic starch with the scope of this project. Two types of pea starch were tested. They all supplied by Post Canada. We thank you, Janelle, for coordinating the supply of this starch. The first starch is we see it as a pure starch, starch isolate, and the second one with more than 10% residue of protein and some fiber and other components is was starch-rich flour. Other material, first one, plasticizer. We try glycerin. We also try ethylene glycol. Both be considered as safe for indirect contact with food. And we also see that citric acid can play a big role to stabilize the property of the bioplastic made of starch. So we try either include co-plasticizer or not. But because the citric acid is a powder, so it has to be dissolved with water first, and then mix with other two main plasticizer. Secondly, the processing parameters also play a big role. How much plasticizer be put in? So we have done a lot of preliminary tests. We found out if we put too small amount, it will be dry, it won't flow, won't be getting softer. If we put too much, it's just too liquidized. You won't have a good property by collecting the strand. Another big factor is the extrusion temperature processing parameter. If the temperature is too low, the geolization doesn't even happen. If it's too high, it might degrade. So we try test 100 degrees C and 130 degrees C. This is the layout of the extruder we use. Basically, a starch feed to the feeding pot from the first barrel. There is an opening there. And following that, the second barrel, we inject a mixture of a plasticizer. And the mixture was heated and mixed while and the compounding happening inside the extruder. And at the end, you will collect the bioplastic. So now you can see the strand, a plastic strand, by using the starch-rich flour. And the strand stay in room temperature overnight to dry out a little bit, then cut into pellet by using the pelletizer. So from the right-hand picture, you can see that starch-rich flour, the appearance is quite different with the isolate one. I think the color are different, the transparency are different. If that's a consideration in your product design, you have to think about it. Following by that, we make the specimen for mechanical property test by using our injection motor. And these two specimen treatment, you can see that both of them, you can see through the black line I draw on the mat. So it means the transparency is pretty good. But this one is made of the pure starch, the starch isolate, not the one with a lot of dark color. This is show you how to do the mechanical property test. Basically, this is the tensile test by using our instrument. And you can see that from the result, the average of the elongation is cancer for around 100. And you also can see over here is double the length of the gauge length. So in this case means the elongation property is pretty good for this treatment, and implying it can be used for some film application if you need it's flexible and also it can stay quite long strand before it broke. On the other hand, we have 5 treatments show quite high tensile strength and flexural strength. So this type of product can be used for rigid packaging application, I believe. What we found from our project, this is a summary of the two-way ANOVA analysis on tensile strength and elongation. And in the table, you can see that there are 5 factors there. Starch is the first main factor. And either of the other 4, plasticizer, co-plasticizer, plasticizer inclusion, extrusion temperature, could be a second factor. So I already highlight the significant impact by using the yellow color. Basically, it's above the strength. And there is also another significant impact from only elongation side. So the critical value we use here is 0.05 and 0.01, with 1 star and 2 star to indicate the significance. So we can conclude that from the table, significant effect came from plasticizer, co-plasticizer, plasticizer inclusion. That's all about the tensile strength. And it's a little bit complicated. We found that the interaction effect of starch and the extrusion temperature on elongation. Finally, we found out there are no big difference was found out on mechanical property, both on strength and elongation from the starch type. Means no big difference for the 2 types of starch. So we are going to talking about the detail. So the effect of plasticizer on strength, we can see that on the left hand, the glycerin gave us much higher strength compared to if ethylene glycol as the plasticizer. If we use co-plasticizer, as you can see on your right-hand side, it will lower the strength compared to pure without any co-plasticizer involved. And this shows that if you reduce the mixture of plasticizer from 50% to 40%, we significantly increase the strength of the plastic we made. The interaction of the starch and extrusion temperature tell us the story that by increasing the extrusion temperature for starch-rich flour, we can see significant difference. High temperature give you bigger elongation rate, but that's not the case for the starch isolate in the blue color. No big difference there. That's what we can conclude from that. So finally, I want to give you some message that we are looking forward to continued or future collaboration again with Post Canada. And we are working right now with some other organization as well. We want to extend the scope of the research on starch application or post-starch or post-meal on bioplastic application side. Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation did the sustainable packaging and bioplastic research funded by Canadian Agricultural Partnership funding last year. And we are going to continue this work to do some more technology assessment and the market research on bioplastic side with additional funding from Alberta Innovate. As I said before, we have more equipment coming in, and we will have better capacity to provide more and better service to clients. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. So we are going to bring all of the speakers back for a question and answer period here. And just as a reminder for those of you listening in on the call today that you can put your questions into the chat box located on the right-hand side of the screen. So we do have a couple of questions that did come in throughout the presentation here. The first one, I might actually just respond briefly, and then I might throw it to the RTI innovation team. So question from Yuri, just looking at what's been studied on green peas versus yellow peas, and if we do find differences between the two. So I'll just comment here that when we're looking at fractionation capacity here in Canada, the majority of what is produced would be on yellow pea, and therefore what we do see a lot of the research is actually focused on yellow pea starch properties. That being said, there are some companies that I'm aware of that have done some production runs using green pea as well. So I do think there is some commercially available from Canada in particular. But I'm not as familiar with the research on green pea starch, so I probably would have to do a little bit of investigating just in terms to look at if the properties themselves would be different from green versus yellow pea, but we do see a lot of similarities just in the general composition between the two. But then I guess kind of moving on from there, I don't know from the RTI team if you did see any mention of green pea in any of the patents that were analyzed there. It might have come down to just simply if they were willing to mention specifically the type of pea or not.
Yeah, I think you make a great point there, Janelle. Most of the time when you're looking at intellectual property, the folks who are applying for those patents are trying to be as broad as possible. So oftentimes you're not going to see a specification, and sometimes you'll even see a laundry list of things that include pea as one of the potential options. So I think green pea definitely was mentioned in some of the patents, but from our understanding of the pea industry as a whole, it's likely that yellow pea is being employed most of the time. And I think from some other work that we've done looking at the properties of the two, and Janelle, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but they're relatively similar in terms of, components. Green pea just tends to have a sweeter and more grassy flavor as opposed to yellow pea. So for ingredient applications in particular, yellow pea and yellow pea derived ingredients are often employed.
Thanks, Jacob. All right, so we have another question here. Just if you can comment if there were any patents that were leveraging combinations of starches. So there's specific mention here to combining different pulse types, but I wonder also, I do know that there was some combining pulse starches with other sources of starch as well, if you guys might comment on that.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen a few examples of, like you mentioned, combinations of pulse starches or pulse starch and something else. Some examples of combination of pulse starches within the baked goods category. So some of the patents that we've seen for like gluten-free bread specifically mention a combination of pulse starches. And the property that's mentioned for that is structural one, so really making sure that the combination achieves the same texture that you would have with regular bread. And then another example is ingredients for oil and water emulsions. Some of the patents that we've seen also mention a combination, and that is for their water structuring ability. Another example of a patent that was combining pulse starches specifically with cornstarch was in the pudding and gels category, because sometimes when you use just pulse starch, there is a risk of syneresis. So combining it with cornstarch helps mitigate that issue.
That's great. Thank you. Jambo, I'm wondering if you in your lab, you've done any work looking at combinations of starches for bioplastics.
No, not. The project with Post Canada, we just use the two starch you supplied to us. One PUP starch. My understanding is yellow pea. Another one is just a flour, maybe contain more protein residue and fiber and all stuff. And we are working with another organization by using the lupin, but that's the totally different. In terms of the composition, it looks like there are quite less starch in the meal, a lot of fiber, and the protein residue. Its performance differently in terms of bioplastic side, but I don't know for other application yet.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And thanks. Do you mind maybe just from your experience, how did you find working with some of the pea starch relative to some other starch sources that you might have worked with in other projects?
The past few years, I use also starch used as an ingredient for just play the role of binding, but not specifically to bioplastic. And it's also yellow peas because my clients ask me to source the starch locally. It's a kind of means in West Canada, and also yellow pea starch. That is, they play very well in terms of the function I was looking for.
That's great. Thank you. So we have a couple of just comments thanking everyone here. So I'm going to leave it maybe one more minute in case anyone in the audience would like to ask one final question, but otherwise would like to thank you all for taking the time to prepare your presentations for today. It's very insightful. I'd just like to remind everyone that reports that are summarizing a lot of the information that was presented here today are available for download. So you should be able to find them both on the event platform here, and then we will also be circulating them alongside the recording of today's session following the webinar to everyone who registered. So
that's good news to me because I missed the first part.
Yeah, there you go. You can listen in after too.
Yeah.
Perfect. I don't see any other questions coming in. So I just want to thank everyone one last time, and we'll look forward to seeing you all again. And reach out to myself if you have any questions on any of the work that we've been doing related to starch. So thank you all and have a good rest of your day.